What if the unthinkable became reality? Imagine a major European city struck by a chemical gas attack or a dirty nuclear bomb. Are we really ready to deal with such a nightmare scenario? Welcome to On the Front Line. From massive terrorist attacks to major natural or man-made catastrophes, history shows how difficult it can be to predict, let alone prevent, such disasters. But when the worst does happen, what next? Limiting the potential impact of such devastating events remains a top security priority for national governments and the EU. Mock drills like this one recently held in Belgium aim to do just that. This exercise saw emergency teams from across Europe take part. Increased solidarity and cooperation between countries is seen as vital if there's to be an effective response to the complex cross-border nature of threats.
Every country has tents. We can put them next to each other. What we need are doctors, nurses and equipment. We have the tents, but what we need in large numbers is the medical staff to treat the victims.
Delivering such a rapid response could mean the difference between life and death, especially if one country was overwhelmed by a major chemical, biological attack, or even worse. Better common disaster planning between states in Europe is therefore seen as key, but it also raises the question: how can countries with different practices, equipment, culture and language work well together? On a practical level, is this useful?
It's very useful, actually, because there are a lot of points we can learn out of this exercise. The first is the communication. We are all European models. We can talk to our colleagues. We see actually their procedures and we are forced to find solutions to work together, and that's the most important point of that exercise.
Until now, the subway sarin attack in Tokyo in 1995 is the only time in recent memory where terrorists have hit a major city with chemical weapons. Creating panic on the Japanese capital's underground network, the attack claimed 13 lives. Scores were severely injured. Dr. Jamie Shea, let me begin with you. You're a NATO expert in security challenges. Is it only a matter of time before we see something like what happened in Japan in the 1990s, a major European city being hit by a dirty bomb or chemical attack?
I don't see that this is inevitable, of course not, but we do know from intelligence reporting that terrorist organisations like Al-Qaeda or Islamic State, currently in Syria and Iraq, have shown an interest in getting hold of chemical or biological or even nuclear capabilities. But having the plan doesn't mean to say that they have the capacity. And don't forget, when it comes to terrorism, you get a lot of publicity, as we saw in South London recently, simply using a knife to kill a soldier. So terrorists don't have to use these means to generate the kind of publicity that they're seeking.
But there's strong evidence that chemical weapons have been used in Syria in the last couple of years. Isn't it naive to think this won't happen in Europe?
No, it's not naive at all. And therefore, that's why now the intelligence organisations have massively increased their staff, their capabilities, their international cooperation, precisely to track these kind of events. Because you're right, terrorists show a great deal of ingenuity in being able to move from one type of an attack to another. Okay. But there are also signs that intelligence cooperation is better than it was before 9/11 in stopping many of these plots.
All right, OK. Luc Ramboud, let me bring you in. You're a crisis management expert. Is Europe as prepared as it can be to deal with a large-scale attack on a par with 9/11 or even a catastrophe like Fukushima?
Is Europe prepared? I think no single nation, no single community can be prepared, because if you consider the whole spread of what can happen in terms of risks, threats and incidents, consequent incidents, it is completely impossible to prepare for anything. The question is, where do you balance what an individual state or what a community can do in terms of probability, in terms of capability, as to compare what you think that is likely?
OK, so is there common agreement between countries about what the potential risks might be then?
I don't think so, because if you look at France, UK, Germany, Denmark, whatever, and look at their top 10 of conceived risks and how they want to cope or want to accept it as a society, there are considerable discrepancies or the considerable differences in viewpoint.
OK, I'd like to go to Helena Lindberg, who joins us from Stockholm. Helena Lindberg, you're the Director General of the MSB, Sweden's Civil Contingencies Agency. We've just heard that not all member states are prepared. Is Sweden prepared for all eventualities?
Well, we do actually prepare and invest a lot in prevention, and also to have the right tools and mechanisms in place to deal with a major contingency such as a CBRNE attack.
So if there was a cross-border attack which involved more than one country, who would lead such an operation?
I think it's important to understand that there is not one person or one organization that can take the lead. What you would need to do is to coordinate and cooperate. And we do have mechanisms in place there to have assistance, to receive assistance from other member states through the civil protection mechanism to tackle such the big one. If it's a big one, and if it affects several member states, of course the coordination is even more complex.
Isn't this a supranational response, or the big one, as Helena just mentioned, isn't that fraught with difficulties?
I think from an operational point of view, one big issue will be that an incident occurs and your response time is close to zero. You have to respond immediately. Based on exercises and initiatives from the European Commission and European Union, things are moving forward, but we still have that big need on the first golden hour, or the first golden day. How can we respond on a large scale to something where international response, even though it is optimized, will come too late?
Dr. Shea, when would NATO get involved in this?
Well, obviously, we get involved when the nation feels that it needs international assistance. It can call on NATO in a number of ways. I mean, the first thing is we have something called the Euro-Atlantic Disaster Response Coordination Centre, which, similar to the EU, is able quickly to process requests. Imagine, for example, a catastrophic cyber attack, which a country couldn't deal with. This mechanism would allow you quickly to identify backup capability, to reroute your systems, alternative servers, those kind of things.
If it was a huge attack, then the military would come in almost immediately, wouldn't it?
I think you've got to distinguish, Paul, between different types of crises. Sometimes the terrorist attacks that you've been talking about are much more local. Yes, they generate a lot of publicity, but they're much more localised, a metro system or one bus, and that often can be dealt with by the police and the emergency rescue services. But the military are there. Let me just add, what we can do in NATO is maintain certain niche capabilities that can really assist. You mentioned earlier on in talking to Helena there, CBRN. We have a centre of excellence on this in the Czech Republic, which can instantly analyse which biological or chemical substance is being used, what the nature of it is, and get all of that information out so that you identify the correct response quickly.
If NATO is a centre of excellence for this and has probably more capacity than say the EU, wouldn't it automatically take charge?
No, not at all. I think it's very much up to both organisations to offer to the stricken country what their various assets, and I think that's all to the good. Two legs are better than one, right?
Okay. Luc Ramboux, I'm a little bit confused here. It doesn't seem clear to me who would take charge of these kind of operations.
Yeah. I think, as pointed out by the two other speakers, it isn't clear. It depends, of course, a lot on the circumstances. And if you also compare internationally and within the European Union, the view on, for example, using military assets, there are differences. Some countries still call it the asset of last resort, whereas in other countries, other member states, it is embedded in civilian emergency planning, or it is identified as a niche player whereby they are priority frontline responders for that specific niche.
Helena Lindberg, isn't there the potential here for chaos? You talk about coordination, but it seems to me that this could be quite chaotic.
Well, if you have trained and exercised and everyone is clear about their role and their area of responsibility, it does not need to be chaotic. On the contrary, I think it would be chaotic if only one single organization would be the responsible agency or organization to deal with it. So it's a multiple effort that is needed out of a good situational overview, both of where the problems are and also to have the right mechanism in place in order to be able to quickly provide assistance to the country that needs it the most.
Should there be more public awareness about the potential dangers?
I think overall there is indeed a need for society, for industry and the civilian to be more aware not only on how to respond and to assist the professional emergency services when disaster strikes, but also in creating a resilience in terms of decreasing vulnerability.
Okay, Helena Lindberg, what is Sweden doing in terms of improving public awareness about the risks?
This is for sure a question that lots of countries wrestle with. How do you increase public awareness and how do you have the right balance there? Because we don't want to scare everyone. We need to actually improve resilience in our vulnerable societies, and one way of improving resilience is to have the citizens that are resilient, that can actually take care of themselves in a major situation and can assist their neighbors in case of a big disaster.
Let me finish with you, Dr. Shea. More needs to be done in terms of improving public awareness. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Our citizens have to know, but of course our way of life has to go on. You can't always stop the strike, but by being well prepared and well rehearsed with good leadership and everybody knowing what their job is, you can significantly limit the damage. So in other words, we may not always be able to predict the black swan, but we can certainly clip its wings very quickly after it's happened. And that is really where crisis management has to be focused.
OK, a nice moment to end, I think. That's it for this edition. You can join us on social media, YouTube, as well as Euronews.com. Until next month, thanks for watching.